She watched from a corner in the cafeteria as the lunch lady leaned closer to the boy before serving him. There was a brief moment where the two shared a knowing look before the lady smiled. The boy blushed, looking around before he extended his hand for the special meal. Word had been going around that something sinister was happening in the cafeteria. Witnessing it firsthand, the teacher knew she had to get to the root of it. What she'd find would have her dialing the authorities. The last thing elementary school teacher Cassie Johnson expected to do that day was phone the authorities, begging them to rush to the school. She'd always been a dedicated and compassionate teacher and had always prided herself on creating a supportive and nurturing environment for her students. So when she realized one of the best kids in her class was in trouble, she knew she had to step in. Every sunny weekday morning, her wonderful and energetic third-grade students walked into the classroom with beaming smiles. Cassie greeted each and every one of them, mirroring their infectious enthusiasm throughout the day. Among her most cheerful and brightest students was Clive Anderson, a boy who'd impressed Cassie with his academic prowess since day one. If only she knew what was about to happen to him. Clive was a truly gifted boy. He was intelligent, generous, and always eager to participate in class activities. He always walked around with a smile, his boundless energy preceding him wherever he went. He was the heart of Cassie's classroom, and she admired his hard work and dedication, often mentioning his achievements to her fellow teachers. However, things would take a dark turn as the semester progressed. It all started with a bit of change in his behavior. Cassie realized that Clive was less chirpy than usual. He sulked in his seat and seemed lost in his head. When she asked if he was okay, he only stared blankly at her before looking away. This shift in behavior had Cassie worried. She'd never seen him like this in the 3 years she'd taught Clive. She took it upon herself to get to the root of the issue. Cassie kept an eye on Clive as the week passed. Where he was once the life of the classroom, egging the other kids to answer questions or play along to whatever game Cassie was using as a mode of teaching, he now appeared despondent and withdrawn. His usual vibrant eyes were now shrouded by sadness, and his laugh, which had never failed to light up the class, had vanished. Something was terribly wrong. Cassie could no longer ignore what was happening. The concern in her heart weighed on her heavily. Something was troubling Clive, and she wouldn't forgive herself if she didn't find out what it was. She started studying him with more interest than before. She wondered if his issue was caused by something within the school. Was he being bullied by the other students? The answer would be way worse than that. After the last bell rang one Monday afternoon, Cassie asked Clive to see her after school. "Clive, can I have a word after class?" she asked with a gentle smile. He nodded and neared her desk, and she walked him to a quiet corner. "Yes, Mrs. Johnson?" Clive hesitantly replied. He glanced up at Cassie with glossy eyes before his gaze flew to his feet. "I've noticed you haven't been yourself of late," Cassie said, while going down on one knee. "It worries me to see you this way. Is everything okay?" Clive looked at her for a second, his eyes boring into her. He seemed to be analyzing her words, gauging the authenticity in them. His answer would lead Cassie to the truth. "I am," the boy said, holding his gaze throughout the exchange, but Cassie could tell he was hiding something. He kept looking outside the window, where other kids were running into the bus to go home. He seemed to have picked up something good outside because he smiled, though slightly, and asked Cassie if he could leave. "Of course," the teacher said, knowing this was far from over. Clive's reaction had taken Cassie by surprise. She'd never known him to be a liar before, but today she'd experienced this side of him. She watched from the class window as he ran out of the school building into the afternoon sun. She was about to turn around when she saw something that piqued her interest. Like most other students, Clive loved it when the school bus driver parked the bus at the gate, ready to take him home. He was usually among the first to race to it, laughing loudly. But today, he didn't run toward the bus as usual. He took a path to the left, heading to the side of the school, where he disappeared for a second. When he came back into view, he was holding a brown paper bag. Cassie couldn't wrap her head around what was happening. Why had Clive's behavior changed all of a sudden before he rushed out? Why didn't he go straight to the bus, and where did he get the brown paper bag? But the most crucial question was, what was in the bag he so happily carried in his grasp? In the 2 weeks Cassie spent worrying over Clive, today was the first time she saw him in a good mood. He hopped onto the bus with his signature smile. A bamboozled Cassie watched in silence. She thought it was over when Clive started waving at someone out of nowhere as the driver pulled out of the parking lot. Cassie opened the window and stuck her head out, trying to see who Clive was waving at. But the parking lot was empty. She stood at the window for a few minutes, trying to understand what she'd just seen. It soon became apparent that if she were to crack this case, she'd have to track down whoever Clive's mystery friend was. Cassie spent the rest of the week shadowing Clive, trying to pinpoint his friend. He was back to sulking again, sitting alone in class and at recess. She was almost losing hope when she heard a few of the kids talk about Clive one day. They insinuated that something terrible was happening between him and a faculty member. Cassie was speechless when she heard these rumors. She had yet to learn that they were entirely accurate. Cassie continued watching over Clive. She was keen to uncover this mystery, and even moved around a few of her classes, hoping that she could keep an eye on him during lunch break and recess. During one of these breaks, she finally saw what was happening with her own 2 eyes. It turns out those kids weren't lying at all. Cassie's heart raced as she discreetly observed Clive during lunch break. He was sitting alone at a picnic table near the edge of the playground, seemingly lost in thought. Her eyes widened as she saw a familiar face approach him, the lunch lady. With her heart pounding, Cassie strained her ears to catch their hushed conversation. She could barely believe what she was hearing. The lunch lady was not only speaking to Clive, but she was also handing him something: money. It became painfully clear that something underhanded was occurring right under everyone's noses. She could see the other children looking, and it was almost like it was an open secret. Cassie didn't know what to do at that moment. She didn't want to confront them in front of everybody. That would just embarrass them. But she needed to get to the bottom of it. There was something going on, and it seemed like most of the children knew about it. The lunch lady had made it no secret that she was handing something over to Clive. But maybe it wasn't what she thought it was. Would the lunch lady really put her job in jeopardy if it was something illegal? When lunch break was over and everyone came back to the classroom, Cassie searched for Clive, but he wasn't there yet. Maybe he stopped by the bathroom first, she thought. She began her lessons without him because she didn't want the kids waiting. But her mind couldn't focus anymore, and she had to ask the other kids, "Have any of you seen Clive?" The children all began to look around, not having noticed that Clive wasn't in class. They began to whisper to each other. Cassie observed them and saw that some of them might know where Clive was. "Timothy, do you know where Clive is?" she asked. Timothy, a shy boy, got up from his chair and made his way to Cassie. "I saw him go to the cafeteria, Miss Johnson," was all Timothy said. Cassie only sighed. Something was up. For the past week, kids had been talking about something that was happening in the school cafeteria. The rumors weren't the best kind, and Cassie hoped they were just that, rumors. But that day, something kept pushing her to follow Clive during lunchtime. The teacher gave in to the urge, ushering a few kids into the cafeteria, Clive included. She pretended to walk away when the kids joined the food queue, but she hurried behind a corner and bided her time, waiting to see if there was any truth to what the kids were saying. Clive walked up to the lunch lady. He had already picked a tray for his food, but he didn't hand it over, instead holding it against his chest with both arms. Cassie didn't know what to expect, but what the lunch lady was about to do was despicable. Cassie started second-guessing her decision to stand idly by once again. But what else could she do? She had no evidence against anyone, and all they were right now were rumors. She considered going to the principal, but she knew how that would end. An investigation would be launched, but it meant that the lunch lady would be tipped off to the attention and she'd never get caught. This was Cassie's only way of making sure Clive would be okay, but she couldn't help but feel like whatever was going on, it wasn't all right. She wanted to believe that the rumors weren't true. But now that it was Clive's turn at the front of the queue, Cassie was about to see if there was any truth to the rumors. She was watching with bated breath, but no one was ready for the truth. Since Cassie was feet away from the serving line, she couldn't quite make out what the lunch lady was saying when she started talking to Clive, but she could see her grin and wink at him before gesturing him to hand over his tray. Clive reluctantly did, but the lunch lady did something else that had Cassie's brows furrowing. Cassie felt her stomach churn as she thought about all of the rumors and what was going on. She had a bad feeling about everything as the lunch lady gave her student a sinister grin. She was about to give something to him. Cassie felt dread creep up her spine as the lunch lady extended a hand to the boy, but it wasn't empty. She was about to give him something that wasn't on the menu. The lunch lady handed Clive a brown paper bag similar to the one he happily ran into the bus with the other day. Was she the mysterious friend he ran to instead of going straight to the bus? Cassie's mind raced with questions, but she couldn't come out of her hiding spot. Not yet. She continued watching, knowing there was more to this than was meeting the eye. Cassie strained her eyes, trying to make sense of the situation. As Clive handed over his tray, the lunch lady discreetly slipped something into the brown paper bag she was holding. Cassie's heart raced as she realized that this was the same brown paper bag she had seen Clive receive from the lunch lady before. The boy had seemed depressed for weeks, but now he was chipper than ever, and she knew it all had to do with whatever the lunch lady was giving him that wasn't normally on the menu. Did it all explain his new behavior? Cassie knew she was close to finding out the truth. It just took a little bit more restraint on her part to crack the case wide open. Her mind raced with possibilities. What could be in that bag? Why was Clive receiving something from the lunch lady in such a secretive manner? The lunch lady gave Clive a warm smile and a pat on the shoulder before he walked away with his bag, seemingly oblivious to the weight of the situation. Cassie couldn't believe that this exchange happened out in the open for everyone to see. Now that she had proof of the exchange, she had to quickly act before anything more drastic happened. If she ever let something happen to one of her students, she'd never forgive herself. She quickly planned her next move. She needed to get to Clive before the evidence was gone, and she was no more than a crazy person, but she couldn't be too obvious either. Cassie's instincts kicked into high gear. She knew she had to confront Clive about this. After the lunch break, when everyone would be back in class, Cassie would ask Clive to stay behind. She had to tread carefully, as she didn't want to scare him off or make him feel cornered. But was she doing the right thing? Cassie sat with the young boy and looked him in the eyes. That's when it occurred to her. Had she done the right thing? She felt doubt start sowing into her mind as she started talking to the boy. She thought about how the boy had suddenly been happy, and it was because of the lunch lady. What if things were innocent, and the rumors weren't true? It took Cassie a moment to figure out exactly what she wanted to say to the troubled boy. She couldn't make him feel like he was in trouble, even if she knew the evidence was in his possession. She didn't want him to run away. She decided to try and be subtle. She started by asking him if everything was okay, but she wouldn't be ready for the answer. All the small boy had to say was that he didn't want to talk about it, but he did have a strange insight she didn't expect. "I'm a lot happier now. I know I was a little sad, but not anymore," he told Cassie, who was bamboozled. Then she started thinking about everything that had happened up until that moment. She started thinking about what the boy had to say. Had she misread the situation? But when she looked at him again, he seemed to look happy and content. There didn't seem to be anything sinister going on. If there was, would Clive not come to her for help, she thought? Cassie felt conflicted at this point. She wanted to find out what was going on between Clive and the lunch lady and their secret exchanges, but she also didn't want to interfere too much. She observed him for a few more minutes. Was she reading too much into this, or should she trust her instincts and intervene? Cassie couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in her gut. She had always prided herself on being there for her students, and Clive was no exception. Even if he seemed content now, she couldn't dismiss the fact that his behavior had drastically changed recently. Clive took his food tray and mysterious paper bag to a lone table at the furthest end of the cafeteria to eat. Cassie found it weird that he was sitting by himself. Clive had always had many kids lining up to eat with him. Cassie felt sad seeing him all alone. She was about to approach when the lunch lady beat her to the punch. The lunch lady walked to Clive, sitting with him for a few minutes. Cassie wondered if they were related in one way or another, but she'd met Clive's parents before and was sure they weren't related to the lunch lady. She wanted to give the woman the benefit of the doubt. If what the other kids said about her was true, she would face the law very soon. She wished that she could just have trusted the faculty, but the biggest issue was the rumors that she had heard. Sure, they could have just been schoolyard stories, but if they weren't, Clive was in danger. She couldn't let the child fall into the mishap. She would try her best to make sure she upheld her responsibility as a teacher, but then she noticed something about the boy. Clive seemed uncomfortable sitting with the lady, although he was clearly less miserable than usual. After a few words between him and the lunch lady, he finished his tray and stuffed the brown paper bag in a backpack he'd been carrying. Afterward, he waved goodbye and walked away. Cassie walked away from her corner as well. Something was going on, and whatever was in that brown paper bag would tell her what. Cassie had made up her mind. She needed to find out what was in that bag, for better or for worse. If it was nothing to worry about, then she would be relieved, but she couldn't risk the rumors being true. It was a delicate situation, and she needed to approach it delicately. One misstep meant she would never know the truth behind what was in the paper bag. Cassie followed a quiet Clive back to class. Her mind had already worked out an elaborate plan to ensure she'd search his backpack without him knowing. As his teacher, it was her duty to ensure that she averted any danger aimed his way. She couldn't watch him flounder when she had the power to help him. Cassie waited for every kid to settle in class before informing them they would have the rest of their period on the playing field. Everyone except for Clive jumped joyfully, and the teacher ushered them out of class. She asked them to go to the field, assuring them she was right behind them. But as soon as the class was empty, she hurried to Clive's backpack. She knew that what she was doing was wrong. She didn't have a right to do this, but she had no choice now. If she didn't take matters into her own hands, then something serious could happen. She made sure no one else was looking when she found Clive's backpack. The moment of truth was seconds away. What was she about to find out about the lunch lady and the young student? Cassie opened the backpack and reached for the brown paper bag. She only had a little time since leaving the students on the playing field during class wasn't ideal. The kids were ecstatic to be having an extra recess, but she was taking a huge risk doing it. No teachers were allowed to do things like this, but now she had the bag in her hands. It was too late to go back. She'd get in trouble if the principal found the kids all alone, but she felt the risk necessary if it meant helping one of her star students. She opened the bag, stepping back at what she saw. She couldn't believe what the boy had been given by the lunch lady. They definitely weren't what was on the menu. She had given him a special treat, and it was definitely why he was happier. Filling the brown paper bag was an assortment of foil-wrapped delicacies, from pizza slices and cheese sandwiches to vegetables and fruits. Cassie wrapped them back up and returned everything the way she found it. She didn't know how to process what she had just found. She had to plan her next move, but things would escalate quickly. She went to teach her class, even more confused than before. Fear bubbled through her as she thought about the implications of the food in Clive's backpack. She only half focused on teaching the kids for the rest of the day. She was coming up with a plan to make sure the kid was okay. That's when she came to a conclusion. She needed to call the authorities. Cassie had always heard stories of faculty members getting involved with students in ways they shouldn't. She prayed that wasn't the case here, but she couldn't live on assumptions and guesswork. She hurried to the lunch lady as soon as her class was over. She had to go straight to the source of everything that was happening. The lunch lady, Mrs. Townsend, had worked in the school well before Cassie joined 3 years ago. Cassie didn't beat around the bush. She asked what was going on between the lunch lady and Clive. Cassie stared straight into the soul of the lunch lady. It was clear that she was going to get the truth out of her one way or another. But what about the authorities? Cassie's call to the authorities prompted a swift response. Within a short while, 2 police officers and a social worker arrived at the school. Cassie explained the situation to them, her heart heavy with concern for Clive and his sister. As they spoke to Mrs. Townsend and gathered information, Cassie couldn't help but admire the lunch lady's compassion. It was evident that Mrs. Townsend had gone above and beyond to help Clive and his sister during their difficult times. The social worker, named Emily, had a compassionate demeanor that put Clive at ease when they talked to him. Emily assured Clive that they were there to help, not to judge or punish. She gently explained the resources available to his family, including assistance programs and support services. Clive's guarded expression gradually softened as he realized that there were people who genuinely cared about his well-being. Mrs. Townsend's act of kindness had brought attention to their plight and led to the intervention they so desperately needed. Cassie, along with the school administration, rallied around Clive and his sister. They organized a food drive among the staff and students to provide groceries for the family. Additionally, the school counselor connected them with local community organizations that could offer further assistance. Clive's classmates, once they understood the situation, also extended their support by showing kindness and friendship to him and his sister. The school became a true support network for the struggling family. Over the next few weeks, Cassie watched as Clive's demeanor gradually shifted. With the weight of hunger and uncertainty lifted from his shoulders, he began to regain his cheerful spirit. He once again became the lively and engaged student she had known. Cassie's heart swelled with pride as she witnessed the positive changes in Clive. The unity and empathy demonstrated by the school community not only helped his family through a tough time, but had also shown Clive the power of compassion and the strength of a caring community. As the school year progressed, Clive's family received the support they needed to stabilize their situation. With access to food, counseling, and financial assistance, they were on the path to recovery. Clive's parents also attended parenting workshops provided by the school, focusing on communication and creating a stable home environment. Cassie continued to be a pillar of support for Clive, offering guidance and encouragement as he navigated through the challenges he faced. The bond between them grew stronger, and Clive often confided in Cassie about his dreams and aspirations.